Let's discuss about useEffect React hook. While talking about useState, I mentioned that we should not use console.log or alert statements to debug useState example code. Let us discuss the reason for that with the help of an example and then discuss how useEffect React hook will help us. To do the example, as usual, we'll need a React application that has been created using the create React app command line tool. If you have one, you can use that, or else you can create one using this command npx create react app followed by the name of the application. I'm using app6 as my application name over here. Once this command completes, cd into that folder, and from within that folder type npm space start. That should start the development server and open localhost colon 3000 in your browser. So I have done that, and I have also opened my React applications folder in VS Code, and within the src folder I have created a couple of subfolders. I have created this component subfolder first, and within the component subfolder I have created this folder called useEffect_examples, and I'll be putting my examples in this folder. The React component that we will implement for this example is the click counter component that we have seen previously. So let's implement this first, and we'll add our console.log statements for debugging also. So let's first implement the click counter component. I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call it clickcounter.js, and it is going to be a function component. So I'm going to write click counter, and I'm going to add a return statement to return JSX, and let us place an empty root tag and also close the empty root tag. At the top we have some text. You clicked 10 times. So let's use a paragraph tag for that, and I'm going to write you clicked 10 times, and below this text we have a button with the label click me. So let's add that button, and the label is click me, and we know that this is something that will change, so we'll have to use a state variable for this. So let's use a state variable over here, and let's call that state variable count, and let's declare the count variable using the useState React hook. So let me write const count comma set count equals useState, and let's pass in an initial value of 0. To use useState we have to import it, so let's write import useState from React. So we have identified what needs to change in our UI, and we have declared a state variable for that, and next we have to write code to change the value of the state variable when this button is clicked. So let's write our event handler. Let's write on click equals handle click, and let's define handle click now. So I'll write const handle click equals, let's make it an arrow function, and in the function body we have to increment the value of count, and to change the value of count we have to use setCount method. So let's use that setCount, and we can either pass in count plus 1. This will work, but the better way is to pass in a function to setCount, because in this case the new value of count depends on the previous value of count, because the new value of count is going to be the previous value of count plus 1. If the new value of the state variable will depend on the old value, then it is better to pass in a function. And so I have done that here now, and I mentioned that this is better than this over here, but I did not discuss the reasons why this is better than this. We'll discuss that also in a couple of minutes, but our first goal is to discuss what happens when we use console.log for debugging useState examples. So let me write a console.log statement, console.log, and let us log the value of count to the console. So what we have done here is we have added code to increment the value of the count state variable. After the setCount function call, we have added a console.log statement to log the value of count to the console. So let's export this function now. Export default click counter, and within app.js I'm going to remove all of this code, and I'm going to specify click counter over here. VS Code has automatically added the import statement for me. So let us take a look at the output now. So we have implemented our click counter example like in the wireframe again. Before clicking on this button, let us open the React developer tools. So I'm going to click on inspect, and I'm going to click on components here, and I'm going to click on click counter component, and this is stuck at loading. So let's reload the page once. So I have reloaded the page, and I'm again selecting the click counter component, and this time we are being shown the props, hooks, etc. of the click counter component. There is one state variable here, and its value is 0, which is being shown over here. I'm going to click on this button now, and we know that the value of this state variable should get incremented, because that is what we have written within the event handler over here. So I'm going to click on the button now, and you can see that this value has incremented from 0 to 1, and this change has been reflected in the UI over here like this. React has taken care of that. In our event handler code, apart from incrementing the value of count, we have also added a console.log statement to log the value of count to the console. So let's take a look at the console now. You can see that the value that has been printed to the console is 0. The value that is being displayed in the UI is 1. And if we go to components, the value of the state variable is 1 like we expect it to be. But in the console, the value 0 got logged. Let me clear the console here and let us click on this button again. And you can see that this value got incremented from 1 to 2, while in the console, 1 has been logged. And if we go to components, we can see that the value of the state variable is 2 as expected. Let us click on this button once again, and we can see that this value has changed to 3, while the value that has been logged to the console is 2. So we can see that the value that is being logged to the console seems to be the previous value of count. So when these two lines of code execute, something is happening which is making this console.log statement to print the previous value of count. And to discuss what is going wrong over here, we have to first discuss about asynchronous functions. Let us look at an example in codepen.io. Here I have 4 console.log statements, but this console.log statement, which logs the string ABC to the console, this is within setTimeout. And the way setTimeout works is that it's an asynchronous function, and any code that we pass to it will be executed after a delay that we specify over here. So here I have specified a delay of 10 seconds indicated by 10,000 over here. This means 10,000 milliseconds, which is 10 seconds. So let's execute this code and look at the output. So I'm going to click on run now and let's see what happens. We can see that 1, 2 and 3 have been printed. ABC has not been printed yet and we are still waiting for that, and now it has been printed. So as we can see in the output, ABC was printed last. So if we trace what happened, the statement got executed and so 1 was printed. Next, this piece of code got scheduled to run after 10 seconds, and then this line of code executed, and so 2 was printed to the console, and then this line of code was executed, and so 3 was printed to the console. After 10 seconds, this line of code got executed and ABC was printed to the console. Most of us won't be surprised by this output because most of us know how setTimeout works and how the delay works. We know that this code will be scheduled to be executed after 10 seconds. But let us make this discussion a little more interesting now. Let's change this value from 10 seconds to 0 seconds. So the delay that we have passed to setTimeout is 0 now. Let's clear the output and run it again. As we can see over here, the output is same as before. That means ABC was printed last again. Although we specified a delay of 0 seconds, which actually means no delay. So the question now is, why did this code execute last even though we had specified that we did not want any delay in executing it? And the reason is that setTimeout is an asynchronous function, and code within an asynchronous function is executed after the rest of the normal code executes. That means as the code is executed from top to bottom, when this statement is encountered, what happens is, since setTimeout is an asynchronous function, the code within it is scheduled to run at a later time. So this code is marked to be executed later. Whether the delay is 0 seconds or 10 seconds, this code is marked to be executed later. And code that is scheduled to be executed later like that gets a chance to be executed only after the rest of the normal code, like this statement over here and this statement over here, complete. That means after the rest of the code within that function or script completes. So this delay over here is not the exact amount of time to delay this code. It is the minimum amount of time that this code will be delayed. So to summarize, when each line of code is being executed, code within asynchronous functions are marked to be executed later, and they get a chance to be executed after the rest of the normal code finishes executing. Now let us come back to our React code over here. The reason that we have discussed about asynchronous functions in detail is these setter methods like setCount over here, which are returned by useState. These are actually asynchronous calls. And we have just discussed over here that any code that is passed to an asynchronous function, like over here or here, gets scheduled to be executed later, and such code gets a chance to be executed only after the rest of the normal code within the function, like console.log statement over here, finishes executing. So this statement over here actually finishes executing before this setCount statement over here. And that is the reason why we see the previous value of count being logged to the console. And the fact that setCount is an asynchronous function, that is also the reason why we have been asked to pass in a function to it when the new value of state depends on the old value of state. For example, instead of this line of code, let's say we wrote setCount count plus 0.5, and let's say we wrote that a couple of times. If this line of code finished execution completely and count got incremented by 0.5, and then this line of code got executed, then these two lines of code together would have had the effect of incrementing the value of count by 1. But since setCount is an asynchronous function, this would not work properly. Let's look at the output to see what we get. Let me clear the console over here, and I'm going to click on the button now, and you can see that the value has been incremented to 0.5, and the value that has been logged to the console is the previous value, which was 0. Let us click on the button once again, and this time the value got incremented to 1, and as expected the value that has been logged to the console is 0.5, which was the old value. So although with this code we try to increment the value of count by 1, the value is being incremented only by 0.5, and the reason why that is happening is because setCount is an asynchronous function. So this code is scheduled to be executed later, and then this code is also scheduled to be executed later, but the value of count has not changed when going from line number 9 to line number 10. So in effect, even though we have written this statement 2 times, it is equivalent to writing it 1 time. And that is why in cases where the new value of the state variable depends on the old value of the state variable, we are asked to pass in a function to the setter method like this. Let me remove this unnecessary code now, and let me remove this extra space as well. And so now we know that we cannot place this console.log statement over here. So let's comment that out, and let us add a comment below that. Let's write, do not write code involving count below this point. So where can we put this console.log statement so that it gets executed only after the setCount function call completes execution? And that is where useEffect React hook comes into the picture. So let's import useEffect, and let's write useEffect. And useEffect is a function. All React hooks are functions, and useEffect takes in a function as a parameter. So let us pass in an arrow function to useEffect, and let's specify the curly braces over here for the function body. And within the function body, let us put our console.log statement. I've copied that statement and I'm going to paste it now. Now let us take a look at the output. I'm going to clear the console and I'm going to reload the page, and I'm going to click on the button now, and you can see that the value in the UI, which is the value in the state variable, has also been logged to the console over here. So this value of 1 and this value of 1 are now matching, and so it looks like our code got fixed. But let's discuss why it got fixed. After React renders a function component, that means after the HTML DOM is updated, we can ask React to run some code, and we usually call that code side effects, and we use the useEffect hook for side effects. Let me mention that once again. So side effects are the extra code that React can run after it is done updating the HTML DOM. We can pass a function to useEffect hook to run at the end after React updates a component, and this function we will typically refer to it as an effect. So the first point to remember about useEffect hook is that after a component renders, the effects will run. So if we trace the steps that happen when state changes, like within the buttons event handler over here, where we are incrementing the value of count using this statement, when the state changes, React updates the UI, that means it renders the component, and after it finishes rendering the component, then it will run the effects. So if you want code to run after the state changes, we can place that as an effect using useEffect hook. Let us recap the steps once again. When the user clicks on the button, the state variable changes. Here in this case, it got incremented from 1 to 2. And when React detects that the value of a state variable has changed, it will render this component once again so that the component shows the new value, which is 2 over here. And then after it finishes rendering this component, it sees that there is an effect that has to be run, which is this method over here. And so it runs this code. Since this code is executed after the state variable has been updated properly, and actually after the UI also has been updated properly, we can be sure that the value of count will be the latest value of the state variable.